Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 794, Johan Koelman is going to be joining me, Gary, and we're going to be talking about the ZX81, the 40th anniversary of the ZX81 last week. But we're not just going to be doing a retrospective on the device. Johan actually coded new games for the ZX81, 1K version, high-res stuff, which you may remember the ZX81 doesn't do high-res, but Johan's been doing that for some time. And he's got a great set of games, really addictive fun games that he has released for the ZX81, which you can try through a real device like this, or you can pick up, you can get one of the free emulators. So we're going to be talking to Johan about the games, why he's coding for the ZX81 now, a bit about the ZX81 and some of the fun games that he's been doing and the kind of tools that he's using and the emulators you can use to try and play them out, play with the games. So let's get straight to Johan and to Gary. So Johan, welcome to the Digital Lifestyle Show.
Glad to be there.
And you're joining us this week, a bit of a different show, a bit of a special show, because last week was the 40th anniversary of the ZX81, a device I'm very fond of, and in fact I've got one here, which the very first computer I got and sort of never looked back. And we were talking online and I've seen some of the work you're doing, and you've been doing some programming for the ZX81, but this is not 40 years ago you were doing this program. You're doing stuff for it now, and incredibly in 1K.
Yeah, I like the fact that you are bound by just 1K of memory and what you can take into it. That's what triggers me to code games.
So it's a bit of a specialist area, I guess, writing for ZX81 and 1K games particularly, not even the expanded one, but let's go back to beginnings. So how did you get into this coding for retro machines and that sort of constricted space?
Well, let me first go back to the 80s. I encountered the ZX81 around 1981, 82, something like that, and some person showed me the ZX81 and he showed us a game. I was just about 14, 15 years old at that moment, and I liked it. But I never got a ZX81. I started with the ZX Spectrum, and I coded games for the ZX Spectrum. Yeah. That's exactly the one. Only I added a Digitronic keyboard to it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, I was always triggered by the ZX81, and I was always thinking from, how come it's not compatible with the ZX Spectrum in its software? And that triggered me to start coding in 1997 for the ZX Spectrum, the ZX81 emulator. There's a ZX81 emulator for the ZX Spectrum to play games on the Spectrum from the ZX81. And also years later I started coding small games from a contest on the internet, mini game compo, and the object was to code the game in just 1K, and so I started coding games in 1K for the ZX Spectrum. And in any moment I was thinking, well, why shouldn't I convert these games to a ZX81? And that's how I started coding on the ZX81. And that was around 2011. And then I had a game called Shogun. It's a board game I have on my own. And I made a version for it in a minigame competition in 2009 for the ZX Spectrum. And it's a game you play against the computer. So it's artificial intelligence by the computer. It's a nice board game to play, by the way. And I was thinking, can I convert that to a ZX81? And I had heard of high-res graphics. So I searched the internet for it, found a high-res routine, converted the game, and so it went on the ZX81. By finding that routine for the high-res graphics, I also found a small program from Wilf Richter that showed us that in 1K it's possible to do some kind of high-res. He showed us a small screen with a few circles on it. Just a demo. Then it triggered me, is it possible to use this technique to code some kind of game? Any kind of game. And then I was thinking, what could be a game in just 1K using high-res graphics to code? And my first game was Wibo Dido, the case of Mercedes Castle. And it's a maze game where an explorer falls through the roof of a castle into a maze system, and he has to find an exit. And he has a torch, and with the torch he can only light a small part of the maze. And by moving through the maze, you will move over the entire screen, showing a big maze only in a small screen.
Mm.
That's the first game I wrote, and then I thought by myself, can I do another game? And then it went on, and went on. And that's how, in the end, I got up to this moment 75 games in 1K using high-res graphics.
Fantastic. Gary's just joined us now. So we're talking ZX81, 1K gaming. Just 1K, just give us an idea then. When you talk about 1K gaming, perhaps people with a modern computer won't understand how limiting that is. So if I've got my Surface laptop here, I think it's the 8 gig model. So an application that I'm running, maybe Teams, or how many times bigger is something like Teams than an 8K than a 1K Spectrum or ZX81 game?
Well, let me rephrase your question. Rob Bell of Willard Such made a review on my 1K game of Minesweeper from the Windows, and he put a picture to it, and the picture alone was 165 times more than the actual game. Just to give you an example.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I mean. It's incredible. You think so? You know, back in 1981, this cost what, £89 or £100 in the UK? I think it's £89. I think. It came in 1K. I mean, most people, like I did, expand it with the 16K RAM pack. And the infamous RAM pack wobble. But now, even I'm wearing a Surface earbuds, the firmware is going to be 100 times bigger than that. But you could actually, get real programs on it, and like you've done, you've actually made real games that run on these things. I mean, there's no video RAM, is there? So you've got to handle all that as well, and you've no hard drive or anything. So it's incredible to think how much squeezed into one of these little devices.
It's exactly the squeezing is the problem. The moment I found how the routine used, which I didn't invent myself, it's all credits to Wilf Richter, who invented high-res graphics, and I just used that routine. But to use that routine into that small amount and get an actual game into it, that's a real hard thing to do. Yeah. Luckily, I have coded a lot of games for the ZX Spectrum, which were a base of my ideas. I had made one-liners to get another idea of small coding. On the ZX81, you can use just one command per line in BASIC. 10 for F is 1 to 10, 20, print F, 13, next F. On the ZX Spectrum, you can use double columns and add multiple commands in one line. And if you code one line of BASIC, and which an actual game is, which was another thing I did, then you can make a lot of games. I did so, and I used that games as ideas to make my games on the ZX81 in high-res graphics. Together with the video pack game system, for instance, which had some nice games which I used to convert to the ZX81 with my latest low-res game, Dig It. We'll talk about that later. So I got the ideas from everywhere, and when on a certain moment when I released the game, someone pointed me to a game on the internet. Can you make something of this in 1K high-res? And then I saw it and said, yeah, well, give me ideas and I will try to do it. That's how I made games as well. So ideas come from everywhere, and then it's, can I fix it into 1K? And why 1K? Well, it's just nice to get it into 1K. It's just the thrill to make it.
Yeah, the programmers these days don't know they live. We've all lost this ability to to actually code small and efficiently. It's such a joy when you write something and it actually fits into such a small space and it actually does something.
Yeah, indeed. I was just talking about Shogun. I coded Shogun for the ZX81, and only a few weeks ago I was thinking, okay, I coded it. It needed 16K due to the high-res game, but can I recode the game to fit it into 1K? And well, that gave me some thoughts, because although the code itself can fit in 1K, it uses tables and expanded routines on the ZX Spectrum and on the ZX81, which made it to use over 2K of RAM just by memory use. And then I thought, whoa, how can I even compress this into 1K? And I finished it last week, 2 weeks ago. And I'm very proud of it, that it's really fitting into 1K with artificial intelligence, because that was a real tough job to get done. I was really missing a few bytes, and then where can I win a few bytes just to fit it in? Yeah, that's the thrill.
I remember. I think we talked a couple of weeks ago. I remember doing coding on the ZX81, my first one, before I got the RAM pack, and you could save memory by putting the numeric variables as strings. Yeah. And then valuing them back to get them into numbers, and you get a magazine listing, and you just, I used to type it all in, and in fact that's pretty much how I learned coding. Really, it's just by typing things in off magazines like Sinclair User or whatever the magazines were, and trying to get them to work. But I eventually copped out and got the 16K RAM pack.
I think we all did it in that way. We all started like that. Which, by the way, is also a slowing down routine, because it uses some calculations to make it again the real number. So it's although it's less memory, it's slower in execution. Mm-hmm. So your game was slow but when you coded something like that, and that's what I hear all the time. You're incredibly fast. So how do you do that? First of all, I can't do this on the ZX81. I'm not coding on a real ZX81. I'm using an assembler on the PC, or I even did it on the ZX Spectrum, and then I compiled it to load onto a ZX81. But I need more memory than just 1K. Otherwise, I really can't fix this in 1K. So I have a computer with more memory, make the game, and it will fit in 1K. That's the only way I can do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it. But most of all, you said, I was typing a number, making a basic listing. If you load a game on the ZX81, most games are not auto start, and you can see the listing on it. Something like a RAM and then some machine code, and then on second line it says randomize user start of game. Something like that. By learning how the ZX81 works, I have optimized all bytes which I can use, which also means that I'm not using the memory as it is expected to use. My full basic routine to start the machine code is fully programmed into the system variables. Just this, okay. Yeah, really every byte it's in the system I use, I will use. In this way, I can do almost anything in 1K. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that one of the first things you worked on was a ZX81 emulator on the Spectrum, because it was never, I don't ever remember it being a thing at the time that, now we kind of expect backwards compatibility, certainly on Windows. You can run virtually Windows 95 programs to some degree on and on Windows 10 now, but at the time when the Spectrum came out, I don't remember there being a huge demand for that backwards compatibility.
No, well, the actual idea came in 1995, something about there. We had a meeting here in Holland, and someone with a Sam Coupe computer, let's say.
Oh, the Sam Coupe.
Yeah, the big brother of the ZX Spectrum, said to me, I once had a ZX81 and I would like to play 3D Monster Maze once again.
Oh, yes.
And then I got the idea, well, on a SAM Coupe, we can run ZX Spectrum software. So I will try writing a ZX81 emulator on the ZX Spectrum so you can run it on your SAM Coupe. That was the idea. And then it took me almost 2 years to make the first version. 2 years of coding. And it was a real slow emulator. And I asked him, well, how is the memory of the SAM Coupe working? And then he told me how it was. And I said, well, if it's working like that, and it's almost the same as on the Sinclair 128 with bank paging, you can have one big memory block of 64K codable. So if it's working like that, then I think we can make a simple emulator, copy the ROM of the ZX81, use the display routine reading the keyboard I wrote. And if we do that, it should, in theory, work. So we copied my display and reading keyboard routine in half a day. And in half a day, we coded SAM81, the first emulator of the ZX81 on the SAM Coupe. And then,
so just remind us what the SAM Coupe was as well, because I remember it, but not everybody will remember that.
Well, I don't own the SAM Coupe myself. That's why I started coding on the ZX Spectrum for it. Well, it's in fact upgraded ZX Spectrum with music, better graphics, all the kind. And with bank switching, you can address for over 1 MB of memory.
And it was kind of, it wasn't an Amstrad device, was it? It was kind of came out, it was,
no,
like you said, 95, 94, 95?
1989.
1989, yeah. And it was kind of, yeah, because Amstrad still owned, well, they still do, but Amstrad owned the Spectrum rights, the Sinclair research rights, and it was almost like an enthusiast product, really, wasn't it?
Something like that. I only learned to know it in the 90s, and then he said to me, I want to play 3D Monster Maze. So that's how the emulator started. And then I coded a new second and a third version, and the third version was in April 1997 already. And I thought, well, this is playable on the ZX Spectrum. And then he went to Germany, to Mönchengladbach, and I had my ZX Spectrum with me, with a Digitronics keyboard, so you can't see if it's a ZX Spectrum, a true ZX Spectrum. And I played the game 3D Monster Maze, and one of the Germans said, well, nice to see you with your ZX81 here. No, it isn't the ZX81, it's the ZX Spectrum with the ZX81 emulator. Well, that doesn't exist. Well, can you do this on a ZX81? And I called the menu. Well, and then in no time, 20 Germans around me. Well, we want to come, we want to come. Yeah, that's how it started. And last year, in 2020, I rewrote the game after finding out that my 1K games, which I now write for the ZX81, needed an updated version. And the updated version is much better than the version I wrote in 1997.
And I should mention about 3D Monster Maze, because this was, I think this was probably the only game I really had. There was a few games. I think I had chess and a few others for ZX81, but 3D Monster Maze was, I guess you could say, is a forerunner of the most of the first two games that we get now. I've got it actually. You can still get that, and it runs on the emulators. But it was kind of like a Doom-esque thing where you were walking around 3D corridors, but on the ZX81, and I played it the other day when it was the anniversary on the emulator. And yeah, it's not really the great experience that I seem to remember, but I just remember at the time it was so immersive. You had these sort of corridors, and there was this Tyrannosaurus Rex there. But yeah, there's something about those early games that you used your imagination and really got into them.
True. And I happen to know a Dutch guy who passed away sadly a few years ago, who wrote a few games for himself as well, which are, by the way, great games if you want to try it. Red Ants, for instance, or Graffiti. Those are games he wrote which are great games, by the way. Not everyone knows them, but they are great. Carlo Del Hess, sadly he passed away a few years ago, but he made great games as well. And they played well as well in my emulator too, and that's what I liked about it. Yes.
Yeah, and so then once I got a Spectrum, then yeah, I didn't get to play those games. So I would have liked your emulator at the time when I got my Spectrum. If you'd written it in whatever 83, something like that.
In 1997, there was a German magazine. It made a review about my game. There was only one negative sound in it. It was 15 years too late.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, exactly what you're telling me. Yeah. Only, yeah, that's about the same reaction I get from Velvet Such saying, where were you in the 1980s coding these games? Which is exactly the problem. I wasn't capable of coding the emulator nor any of these games in 1982, 1983 because I was only 15, 16 years old. I just didn't know how to do it, and now I know it. So, in fact, I was born 20 years too late. Otherwise, I could have done it. Yes.
So from the sort of the Sam Coupe, then you just then got into it. But it's amazing how. Why do you think there's been this revival in sort of these challenges? Is it the physical limitations that really gets you going? That 1K is your limit, and that's the challenge for you.
The challenge is indeed the 1K limit. What can I do into 1K? And some games are easy to code in one game. Other games I've been struggling for over a month just to get the display routine ready. And when the display routine was working, then the game itself was easy. But it's always a struggle to get something working the way I want it to show. Because it's not only the 1K limitation you have, it's also the display routine should fit in a certain amount of time to make a perfect display. Each line needs 270 states, and if it's 206 or 208, the display is out of sync. It's like sending a fax to a machine which is not synchronizing, and then you got a whole wrong fax on the screen. But that's also something hard to get it exactly the way I want it on the screen. That's the first part I'm always doing. Get the screen ready and then get on with the the game development, which I have in mind mostly already. But in the end, it might always end a bit different. Mostly it has more than I wanted in the first place, but sometimes I need to find room, or I can't find the room to add something I want to add to it. Yeah, it's always something which can I add any more, one of this. For instance, the first game I wrote, Vivo Dido in the Maze game, I published it and it had controls of QA ONP.
Yep, classic controls.
Yeah, why not? Most of my games use QA ONP. And then someone asked, could you make it cursor for me as well? And well, it's not much memory you have. Why don't you make two versions? One with QAOP and one with 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then I thought to myself, why not both in one game? So I tried to add it in one game, which worked. So I added into one game QAOP and 5, 6, 7, 8 cursor. And then it told me, wow, how could you do this in one game? And why not two versions? You made it in one game. Yeah, I could do it. And then I added something like, then Sir Morris came to me, do you know the ZX Pen? And could you make something like joystick controls into it? Why not? Could give it a try. So if possible, I will add the extras like cursor control, redefining keys, something like that. And the fun fact is that sometimes it looks like it uses a lot of memory, but the routine I use to redefine the keys is written on the screen, which is later fully used by the game itself. So you don't use the memory anymore for the redefined controls. That's one time you can do it, and then it's over because the screen is used now to display the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there's a couple of software. So first, if you're a end user and you want to play these games, and you haven't got a ZX81, and even if you have, like me, I don't think I've got a TV at the moment that would actually plug into this aerial one at the moment. So what's the best way of getting the emulator so you can run it on modern equipment?
You can download the 81 emulator on the internet, and to play my 1K high-res games, you need to set on the option menu the hardware to high-res settings WRX, and then you can play the games simply by selecting the tape file or the P file, and then it loads into it and you can play it.
Yeah, and is that emulator? Because there's a few different emulators on there. 81, is that one of the best ones to try?
Yeah, it's one of the best ones. By the way, I got a message this week. Someone was playing my latest game and it didn't run, and he had used the latest version of 81, which I hadn't. And that was because the latest version had an interrupt at the moment. I was still copying the screen, so I had to delay the interrupt in the emulator, and then it went well.
So, yeah, so this is I've got 81 running on here now.
Yeah.
What I like about that one is you can select which hardware you've got. So it ships with ZX80, 81, various versions of Spectrums, and even some other ones, the Timex ones. Any of our US listeners will. Gary, can you remember what the ZX81 was called in the States? I know it was a Timex one.
It was Timex.
Timex 1000.
Yeah, it's Timex. Yeah, 1000. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you can get those emulators. So I think that's I like that one. I've used a few. I think Fuse is another one that I've used, but the 81 seems to give you a nice range of hardware that you can play with.
But they had all things bigger in America. The Timex 1000 had a stunning 2K of memory.
Yeah.
So then the other side of that then is, what do you use you mentioned you don't use it on the ZX81, which I don't blame you wanting to code on the membrane keyboard. So what do you use to develop it?
Well, I mostly use Notepad just to write the code, and I have a default setup for the system variables, so when that compiles, it will run when you load it. It compiles to a P file, and then you can load it into the emulator. If needed, I can convert the P file to a sound file, which you can play over the sound card and load it into the ZX81 itself. So within 30 seconds, you can play it on your original ZX81. Which, by the way, I did in the beginning just to test if the games were getting a good display. I bought a ZX81 just to convert it to see if the display was okay. And now I gave that away to someone because now I know what default setting I need to have a good display on the ZX81, so I don't use it anymore. And with a small laptop, I can code on a road trip when I've got a laptop with me. So that's one. Notepad. I use something in Excel or Calc for if you use OpenOffice to calculate the time it needs to do a display on a routine. I use it also to define my graphics, something like that. And that's about it. And
so how do you compile it?
I use a compiler, Shazam Plus. And then I drag the code file into the compiler, and it compiles to the P file. And I can play it directly on the emulator, see how far it is. Nothing more than that.
So you don't need your full Visual Studio suite for that, then?
No need for that. I know. Simple, just keep it simple. And my ideas come from everywhere. Every day I drive about 400 or 500 kilometers, and I get my ideas even by driving on the road. For instance, game 70, which is called Max Verstappen Formula 1 Pit Stop Simulator.
Oh, actually, I want to try that one.
And I got the idea when I drove on the highway and I saw a broken truck tire. And I thought to myself, well, he had to change the tires. Well, Max Verstappen has to change tires as well. Can I make a game about this? Well, that's what I did. And you can see on the game, you see the Formula 1 car driving into the pit stop. And then you have to simulate all the 4 teams changing the tires. You start at tire 1. You have to take off the tire, bring it out, bring a new tire in, put it on. And when you've done, and that's the time it's recorded, and then it goes back. The computer plays what you just did, and you have to do the second tire. And then it goes on with the third and the fourth, and in the end you can replay all the 4 together, and then you can see what's the slowest time of the changing of the tires. And the game came out in the weekend that Max set the new world record in 1.88 seconds. And my fastest time so far is 2.14 seconds.
I'll have to give that a try. Although if you're going back to 1981, 82, I think it would be Jan Lammers.
Yeah, but I thought I'd make it a new game.
It's up to date.
That's how I got an idea. Another other idea around driving was when I saw was in the evening, street lights were on, and I thought to myself, what if a street light broke and we do it commercially? We can't stop the road. Everyone has to drive on, but you have to change the lights because it has to be on. But you have to do it while all cars are driving. But when a car is driving, you can't see it because the light is broken. Well, that game was Highwayman, which is exactly that. You see a highway, the car's driving on it, and a light breaks, and you can't see the car moving on that part of the road, but you have to change the light over there. And that's another idea that came, which by the way has the option in the menu to select 1 or 2. 1 is European driving and 2 is UK driving.
Brilliant. I like that. Now, I saw the other day that with it being the 40th anniversary of the ZX81, you published a new game sort of for that, which I've actually got loaded here on my emulator. Which
I think you should reload it first. I want to see the first screen.
Oh yeah, the Spectrum, yeah. Let me reload that. So yeah, so what made you want to recode that? Or when you make you develop that?
First of all, I owned a VideoPack game computer, so I always thought I should make a version of Pickaxe Speed, which is a popular game on the ZX on the VideoPack.
They can see the loading screen.
Yeah, 40 years ZX81.
Yeah,
it's a full screen. Right? You can see it's a full screen.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's more bytes? Characters.
How many bytes it is? You think?
That's a lot more characters than I think the 81 would originally do, isn't it?
Now, how many bytes it is, you think?
Oh, I don't know. Go on, Gary, what do you reckon?
Just do a guess.
178.
It's 17.
17?
Yes.
17 bytes, not 17 gig. Like an Xbox game. 17 bytes.
It uses a trick I found out that the ZX81 has a compressed screen. We all know that. A compressed screen, when the memory is just 1K, the screen is compressed, which means that unused lines are just a line feed, nothing more. And if you have a full an empty screen, it's 25 line feeds, nothing more. And they always said that's the smallest screen on the ZX81. I have discovered that the smallest screen on the ZX81 is just 1 byte, which is the command jump to the contents of HL, which always jumps back to the start. And that's what this routine is doing. It shows the text few spaces, ZX81 40 years, and then it jumps back to the start. That's repeating in the full screen, and then the hardware does it all by itself when the screen is over. So it's just a quite small screen, but it's got a nice effect just to show it. And I wanted to add it, but I had to find the room. So in the end, I found it, but it was a hard job just to add this screen. But this game is based on the game Big Egg Speed from the video pack system. There's a small miner with big eggs breaking boulders, and which is he shows the boulder, but the big eggs, but I couldn't make it. So the big eggs is on top of the screen. And the game is a bit different than the original, but it had to fit 1K. So, and I wanted to make a tribute to 40 years of ZX81, which is this game. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And it's playable as well. That's what I liked about it. It's kind of a bit addictive and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, that's all the best games.
All the best games. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm trying to add to the game. It must be addictive in some kind of way, or it has to have something which attracts to it. So that's always what I'm trying to find, and I want to be sure it's a nice game to play. So not all are that successful, or not all like the same games. Some are puzzles. Some guys don't like puzzles. Other guys do love puzzles. I have all kinds of games I have coded in 1K. For instance, let me tell you, game 10, which is called Police Patrol. It's a puzzle game, and you find 49 fields city with 49 blocks. And your job is to patrol all the fields in the city by driving a car through the city. And then there's one problem: when you start driving, it will drive on until it hits the end of the city or an obstacle. And each field you visit is also an obstacle. And your job is to visit all the fields but the numbers which is announced below. And that game has 100 levels to solve in 1K. And high-res graphics.
All this definitely takes me back to my early days of programming. So, I think the first game I wrote was a version of backgammon in 480 bytes.
Yeah, it's fun to make it small. Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Was it only backgammon, or was it with intelligence?
It was intelligent. It was semi-intelligent. It wouldn't get classed as machine learning or anything, but it learned a little bit. The crazy thing about that one is it was actually played on teletype. It didn't even have a screen, so I was actually your trick of going back up to the start of the screen. I was using that all the time on teletype to effectively put blobs on and delete them out on the same bit of paper, because we weren't allowed to waste paper back then either, as well as bytes.
Yeah. That's the fun thing. I mostly like games which have some intelligence in it. That's what you said with backgammon. And I've written a few games with some intelligence. There's one game, Othello, or Go, or what kind of game you will give it, which, although I wrote the game, the intelligence is not mine. It's from someone from Brazil. And he defined some kind of intelligence to play Othello, and we coded the game in a one-liner on the ZX Spectrum, and I converted it to a 1K high-res game using that intelligence on the ZX81, and added something extra to it, so you can play 2 levels of intelligence. The first one is where you can have an easy go. And there is a hard level, and the only difference is that the intelligence in the easy level will take the corners on the last step, where on the hard level it will take the corners on the first step, because those are the most tactical points to use in the game. So you've got 2 levels, an easy one and a hard level, which only the difference is 4 bytes. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing and so impressive that a device that came out 40 years ago and is obsolete, and it was almost obsolete, 35 years ago even, that is still getting people attracted to developing for it. And you mentioned about the Spectrum as well, the same thing. There's this community now of people still actively developing for these devices. There's something magical, I think, about these. I think perhaps it's your generation that you first introduced to computers as well. But even I've seen younger people playing some of these games and getting the buzz out of playing them and even developing for them. I wonder why that is then, that there's still that attraction to these old devices now.
I think, first part is indeed it's our generation, which is some youth memories. That's first part, without any doubt. But the other thing is that current development is too hard or too easy. Just how you want to say it. It's too easy because all is defined for you. All you have to do is, I want to make a level with a background like this, and then it works. You can walk over it or something like that. It's too easy. You can't. And when I tell someone we have to define the background, but we also have to define if you can go through it or not. And that's all predefined in the games. So it doesn't give you the thrill. I made my own game. It's all predefined. Current game developers are more asked for their techniques to make drawings or graphical effects or musical effects, instead of their ideas and which is what you want to code, because a lot is programmed already. The technique behind it is so the old machines are much easier to control. If you want to move a simple character with input from the keyboard over your screen, how much work is it just to make a program starting with defining X and Y? Clear screen, print 0 on a X, Y position, do controls if I press Q for up, A for down, O and P for left and right, and go up again and see how it moves across the screen. It's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
And you made it yourself. I think that's one part of it as well.
And I suppose if you're even a hobbyist developer, back in the 80s and now, if you're still doing these retro games, you like you said, you create the whole thing. It's unique to you. You did all the coding. Whereas I guess if you're creating for, you can't just get an Xbox and start making your own game for it.
No.
Whereas in 1982, 83, you could get a Spectrum, as many developers did and started that way, and you could start straight away making your own games. And many people who've gone on to a really successful career in the games industry or various industries started with that, and you haven't got that access immediacy with I get a Windows 10 device here, and I can't just start making my own programs for it. You've got to get all these things, haven't you?
For instance, back to my Shogun programming once again. I will mention it once again. A few years ago, I met someone on the internet, and he said, I would like to make an app of this game. And which he did, and I offered him to help him, because I wanted to make an app myself, but to see what you have to do just to make an app, what kind of software you have to buy and whatever, etc., etc. It was too much for me, so I skipped that. But if he wanted to make that game, I offered him, I can tell you how I made the game, and I will offer you my artificial intelligence, anything, which in the end he didn't. He made his own game for sale for 150 or something like that. But he told me, your game is better than my game. Yeah. So my game is for free. You can play it for free, no problem. I don't mind. I love to see some comments back on the games I write. That's more enough for me. I don't have to get rich on it, which I won't on the ZX81. But I could develop my games on an app or something like that. Still, I'm not doing it because it's too hard for me to do. This is much more fun.
Yeah, I guess it is that immediacy, isn't it? That you can start coding, you get it there, it's there, you run it, it's there, and you're seeing it in real time, and you're not having to worry about frameworks or platforms and dev kits and importing libraries, and you're really there on the device, aren't you? And I guess especially when you're doing the machine code program, you're doing assembly, you're doing the Z80, the coding for the Z80, you're really right in the guts of the machine there.
Yeah. By the way, you said you have to worry about developing or something like that, you said. One of my games is refused in the Apple app, eh? No, if you don't. There's one game.
Yeah.
There's one game which I offered Kevin Pelzer to add to the emulator he wrote for the Apple, which, by the way, only got better with my games in it because some of them weren't running correctly, and then I mailed with him and I told him exactly what had to be done on the screen to make it fix. So this emulator got better with my games in it. But I wrote one game which is a fruit machine simulator. 1K high-res graphics, 13 graphical fruit machines on a wheel turning, which had to be removed because it infringed Apple rules on gambling.
Yeah, I've been caught by Apple's rules on many things. My sympathies on that.
So either he had to buy a license for companies, or I said I have to remove it. I said, well, then remove it. Don't be too hard on it. If they want to play it, you can play it on the 81 emulator. So it's still available, no problem, but it's not on the Apple app.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing with these emulators. And there's emulators for Windows, Mac, Linux. I've got one running on the Raspberry Pi, which I've been trying to get to boot full screen, so that, because I don't know if you've seen this actual key. This here isn't a real Spectrum, but the real Spectrum is over there. This is a Bluetooth or USB keyboard, and it works great with the Raspberry Pi. So my idea was to get this to boot straight into the emulator and go full. I've not quite got it there. It doesn't go full screen yet, but that's the idea. And this works with 81 as well, so you can use that. So you get the proper keyboard entry that you would get from the little keys of there as well. So I've quite enjoyed building that. I think the next thing is to build the Raspberry Pi into some hardware. I'm thinking of an old microdrive case or something like that. I think that's probably what I'll do, is get a broken microdrive, and which is all of them, and see if I can fit one of those boards in there. Quite like the idea of doing that.
Did you convert your own software to an SD card or a hard drive or something like that from tape to?
You could do. I mean, you could effectively sample, can't you? I've got some cassettes. Still got some of my Spectrum cassettes somewhere. So, yeah, I know you can get them into audio files and then convert the audio files into WAV files and play them in. Yeah. So there's so much hardware available now for these emulators, which is quite nice. I know Richard, who's normally on our show, he likes is it the Pi 400, isn't it, Gary? The one with the keyboard. He's been using it for a TI-99 emulator.
Yeah. I'm still trying to get on all Z80 machines a ZX81 emulator. If it's an MSX, I know there is an MSX emulator. I know by now there is one for the Enterprise, which has a Z80, which I today find out is based on my emulator from 1997. So it can be improved, now I know. But there are more systems, and I'd like to convert all the systems to have a ZX81 emulator, if possible, and if best, to run in full speed and all low-res games, because high-res games need a timing issue. It takes a lot of time to build a high-res screen, so even on the Sam Coupe, it's hard to make a high-res screen in a plausible time to play the games in a good way.
I think we need to try and get the ZX81 emulator onto all platforms, the ultimate cross-platform device.
And it was a project I had in 2007, 2008, but it never finished because I couldn't get someone to tell me how Philips P2000 was working on the inside, something like that. I need someone with the knowledge about the original system to convert it to that system as well.
It'd be interesting to know what some of the original ZX81 developers would make of this. How 40 years later, you're stretching the limits of what they designed and running and creating games that run beyond what they ever envisaged. That the high-res stuff, is way beyond anything that I think that they considered at the time. And it'd be interesting to know, what they think of these projects 40 years later, and really getting extracting the absolute maximum out of these platforms.
Yeah, well, that was already in the 80s, when the Cosmic Cockerel came with 49er, or what's the other game with the bulb with the pseudo high-res games on it, which was astonishing at that moment. And if you then add my 1K games, it's beyond what you have expected. You have to think out of the box, and that little black box is like a TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside than it's on the outside.
Yeah, and it's a testament to to the hardware and the software that they did back in the day. That 40 years later we're still talking about these devices, but I think it also takes a special kind of person to want to put themselves through that, to punish themselves to do 1K games.
True, without any doubt. By the way, if you have any ideas about coding games which you think, well, this might fit in 1K, you are always free to send me ideas or whatever, because I can always take a look what I can make of it. And well, sometimes it works. Even game 75, which I released 3 days ago, it was an idea. Someone had an idea about Johnny Walker whiskey, and he had a game where Johnny Walker was walking on the label on the bottle, and where he was, a block appeared, and he had to keep walking. After 20 steps, a random block disappeared, and you have to keep walking. And he made it in BASIC. The idea was good, the execution was less. And I thought I can make it in 1K, and now he sees it in 1K high-res graphics. I says, I like it. So it's his idea, it's my coding, and it's a great result.
So, I recommend to anybody to get hold of the 81 emulator. But where did they find your games then? Where's the best place to get them from?
Sinclair ZX World. On the new game section, you can download all the games except one. I also wrote a 16K game, Load Runner, for the ZX81. It's the same Load Runner as on the ZX Spectrum or on the Apple or any system. Only it wasn't released on the ZX81, which I did a few years ago, and we tried to get a permit from Taito, I think it is, in Japan, to have an official release, which I didn't get. So I distributed the game, but I still hold on who has a copy of the game. So you can get it for free, but you have to register, and you get a registered copy for me in the game, which by the way is also announced in the new game section, but you have to mail me about it, and then you get a free copy. So no problem whatsoever. Which, by the way, that game was also an idea from someone else, and he started with the levels, and he had problems with the compression of the levels, and I had an idea about the compression, which worked out. So we have two versions, 75 levels from Load Runner 1 and 75 levels in Load Runner 2, both in 16K coded on the ZX81.
And I'll include a link to the Sinclair World post site and all the links on the show notes that go with this on the digitallifestyle.com. and the 81 emulator as well. So I can include that so people can get started straight away. It really is a fun nostalgia trip, but then you're seeing, it's not just like a nostalgia of old games. You're seeing new games for your old device or your old thing that you had 40 years ago. It's kind of a bit strange, really, but it's great fun playing these games. And I'm so pleased that there's a brilliant community around them as well, and the whole that these are still alive. These these devices. I still remember the excitement of Christmas unboxing my ZX81 with the big manuals that came with it and the basic guide, which I've got somewhere up in the loft, but. Yeah, it's a nice reminder as well to any gamers who are, current games now is to remember sometimes it's the gameplay and the basics that you get right, and that's what makes the games fun. The graphics and the music and everything else are great, but it's the ingenious gameplay that I think really sets it out, and I think that's what that 1K limit of the ZX81 and even the 16 and 30 and 48K limit of the ZX8 and the Spectrums they made you focus. The developers focused on fun gameplay, and I think that's what really makes them interesting to play now.
Yeah. By the way, I'm googling one time on Twitter. I do a search on ZX81 and see what someone is writing about it. I thought I met you on the same way. I was searching for something about ZX81 and I met you, and that's why I replied to you. Sometimes I see something, I got my ZX81 still here, and then I reply, well, you should play the latest games which are here, and then you see, wow, what? Well, let me have an emulator or something like that. You can reply back, I'll have to start it up once again, something like that. So you get people enthusiastic as well when they know there's something new about the ZX81. If you tell on Sinclair ZX World, hello, I'm new here. I haven't used my ZX81 in 35 years. Well, I think you have a lot to catch up to do. Because not only do we have 1K high-res games, we also have Jim Bagley with his, what's the game called, with the SD card playing. It's that Laserdisc game which he converted to an SD card. Yeah. So it's a game from the video hall from the 80s. Don't know my name now. So he converted it to an SD card, and with the ZX Pen running it, you can play the game on the ZX81.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. It's so brilliant to see these, and let's say if you're our age and you played it back in the day, then you'll love to see it now. But even if you're not, it's well worth checking out these just for the fun game element. Regardless of the retro or everything, they're just fun, addictive, simple games that you can really enjoy playing and get you hooked quite quickly.
Well, and you get what we see. What I see is that I see a lot of guys getting enthusiastic and try to make their own games. Baxter made Berserk on the ZX81. Jim Bagley made a lot of games. We've got Bob Staff who made a lot of games. From Holland, we had Revival Games who made a lot of games. Well, I'm there. There's a lot of games to catch up with and still made for that, as well as on the ZX Spectrum, which, by the way, I'm not seeing too much because I'm too much busy with the ZX81.
Yeah, you don't want to get that newfangled Spectrum. You stick to the you're not into you've got to stick with what you know.
I think I will make a small step back to the ZX Spectrum because in 2000 I wrote another emulator, the Video Pack emulator, for the ZX Spectrum to play video pack games on the ZX Spectrum. And I think when I can upgrade the ZX81 emulator from 1997, making it much better, I might do the same with the Video Pack emulator.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, we'll definitely get you back on when we've got that, and maybe I'll get my Spectrum emulator on that one with the Spectrum keyboard. So, Johan, just remind us where your Twitter is then, because a lot of this stuff you've got is on there, so it's well worth anybody interested in following you.
Well, Twitter account is just at Johan Koelman with an underscore between Johan and Koelman. And if you have an account on Sinclair ZX81, you can PM me, send me messages all the way, no problem. So
excellent. Well, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. It's got me. I'm going to fire my emulator up again and going to try some of your high-res games. I think I want to try those next.
Philip Such made a lot of videos about my high-res games on his channel on YouTube. He didn't do them all. I did them all, but I'm not that funny as he is. So you can see them on my channel, ZX81 high-res. One word, and then you can find all the high-res games I made in order. Not so funny as he does it, but you can see them. You can see them all. And if you want to see his videos, then you can have laughter as well because he's hilarious. On I don't know. Did you see any of them?
No. That's my. I'm going to go and watch those now.
You should do that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it's been brilliant. And a trip down memory lane, but also looking for the new stuff as well. So I really enjoy you joining us. Gary, again, thanks for you joining us again. Gary, just remind us where your Twitter is.
I'm at Gary 2Rs, WMA on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, Gary and Johan, I really appreciate that. And we shall be back with our regular show next week. But you probably find me talking about ZX81 a little bit next week as well. You never know. So until next week, we'll see you then.
Okay. Bye-bye.